So we're going to start. We're going to start over here. We're going to start learning first from the Talmud, and then we'll get into this topic. But first we'll learn from the Gemara. So the Talmud says like this. Today's the 15th day of Av. And there's a Mishnah in the end of Tractate of Titus that the Mishnah says, Loi Hayam Tovim Yisrael Ki Chamisha B'Av. There was no greater holidays, no greater Yom Tov to the people of Israel than the 15th day of Av, Uki Yom Kippurim, and like the day of Yom Kippur, that the 15th day of Av and Yom Kippur were the two most auspicious holidays throughout the year. Shebehem b'nai Yishalayim Yoises b'kli Lavan She'ulim. That on these days, the days of the 15th day of Av and the day of Yom Kippur, the women, the daughters of Jerusalem, would go out in white garments, borrowed garments, not to embarrass, not to embarrass those who don't have those special garments. And there was a whole dating scene where the women would get dressed and the men would come out. And yotzes v'cholos v'kramim, and they would go out like in a circle. And they would, each one would say something else. Each one would say something else. So the pretty ones would say, "Look at the beauty," and the other ones would say, "Sheker Achem V'Yofi." Each group used to say something else. That vanity, falsehood is beauty, and emptiness is superficial beauty. This is what the Gemara says. This is the Mishnah says, but the Mishnah doesn't really explain what this means. It just says that in the 15th day of Av, there was some type of courtship. That the women of Jerusalem would go out with borrowed garments. They would borrow from each other garments. So no one would go out with their own clothes. So not to embarrass someone that doesn't have. So each one's borrowing from each other. And they would, and this was considered a very big Yom Tov, a very big holiday, but we don't know exactly why. So this is what the Mishnah says. The Gemara, the Talmud, which is an explanation of the Mishnah, says like this. This we have also in front of us in these sheets. It says like this. Bishlei Yom Kippurim. I understand. The Gemara says, we're going to read soon in a second. The Talmud says, I understand that Yom Kippur is one of the most auspicious days of the year because it's the days that have repentance and forgiveness. So Yom Kippur, it makes sense that it's a very auspicious time. And it's a day also that the second tablets were given on Yom Kippur, right? 120 days after the giving of the Torah on the 7th of the 6th and 7th of Sivan. So the 40 and 40 and 40, and the third time, finally the second tablets were given on the day of Yom Kippur, so that's the day of atonement. So we can understand why it's a auspicious time. But what happened on the 15th day of Av? So this is the Gemara. So the Gemara says, what's the reason why the 15th day of Av is a special day? So we know what they did on the 15th day of Av, and they would go out into the fields, into the Bnei Yerushalayim, the daughters of Jerusalem would go out in these borrowed white garments. But why? Why specifically in this 15th day of Av? So the Gemara, the Talmud says 6 reasons. And each sage gives another interpretation for the reason why the 15th day of Av was an auspicious time. So the first opinion is, it was a day that which permission was granted the tribes to intermarry. Up until that period of time in Jewish history, there are 12 tribes. Each tribe had to marry within the tribe, but at a particular juncture in history, that was lifted, and the tribes were able to marry each other. And since the tribes were able to marry each other, that became an auspicious time, a time to celebrate.
How long did that last?
What, to marry or not marry?
Like it just started and
then it continued. Now, then the ban was lifted and it was continuous. So up until a certain period of time, first when they entered into Israel, everything was very much, each tribe had their particular domain, every tribe had their particular area in Israel, and because of inheritance and land transfer, it was better for every tribe to marry each other than for the tribes to marry within each other. So once that was lifted, that was considered a time for a celebration. Another opinion says, it's a day that the tribe of Benjamin was permitted to re-enter the congregation of Israel. There's a famous story. We're not going to get into the story. It's a very horrifying story that happened in the times of the Shoftim, the times of the judges, that the tribe of Benjamin did something very terrible, and the whole thing with a woman. It was a really horrifying story, and the judges at that time decided that no one, even if they were marrying with each other, no one should marry them, and they were put in like in a cherem. They were excommunicated, this tribe, the entire tribe. And at this point of time, on the 15th day of Av, is when that, after many years, that was lifted. That ban was lifted. Third opinion. Another opinion says, we're going to understand what's the connection between all these opinions. What does that have to do with the women of Jerusalem going out into the streets? Obviously, these things are going to be related. The next opinion, it's the day that the generation that died out in the Midbar, in the desert, that was the day that they ceased dying. So we know that on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, that was the time originally that when the spies came back and they were crying and they were saying that they're not going to enter into Israel. And at that day became eventually the destruction of the first and second temple. So for 40 years they were stuck in the desert, and the old generation died out. And then the younger generation were the next generation that were able to enter into Israel. So the story is that on the 15th day of Av, that's when they ceased to pass on the year that they finally entered into Israel. And there's a famous story in the Medrash. We'll see soon in a second. Okay, fourth opinion. It's the day that Hoshea, the son of Eliah, removed the guards which was placed on the roads to prevent Israel from going up to Jerusalem on pilgrimage. The king before Miravim set up guards to prevent the people from going up to Jerusalem. There's another opinion that says, Amar Ula Yem Shabitul Hoshea ben Ela b'Herzliya Shahoshea Yom Mevat on the Drachim. Miravim was one of the kings of Judah. Didn't want anyone to go up to Jerusalem, so he put obstacles in the way, and the 15th day of Av, these obstacles were taken away. It's the day that the Aruga Beisar, those who were killed in Beitar during the destruction of the second temple. There was a great city in Israel, Beitar, and it was a horrifying story. The Romans killed everyone in the city, killed the people in the city, and didn't let anyone be buried, and some say it was for many years, and they were lying unburied. And then finally, on the 15th day of Av, they allowed them to bury their dead. The sixth opinion says, the Talmud doesn't say that there's 6 opinions, but if you just count them up, Yom Shepaskum Lichris Eitzim L'Maracha. That's the day that they stopped, which they discontinued the felled trees of the altar. It was taught by Elizabeth the Elder from the 15th day of Av onwards, the strength of the sun grows less, and they no longer fell trees for the altar because they would not dry sufficiently. So they would need trees in the altar in the temple, in the times of the first and second temple, and they would collect trees throughout the summer, because in the heat of the summer, this is the halacha, this is the law that you're not allowed to, on the altar, you're not allowed to kill any insects. And there's a possibility that in the tree there's insects that are living in the tree. So how do you make sure that you have wood that doesn't have any insects? So they would do is they would take trees that were dried out, particularly during the summer months, which we assume that most of the trees that were dried out, there was no living things inside, no living creatures in the trees. And they would cut these wood and then save that wood throughout the year and use the wood. That's what they would do. The 15th day of the month of Av in Israel is the time that the sun starts becoming less intensified as the summer is starting to come to a close, so it's becoming a little more moist, and therefore they say that from the 15th day, Yom Tov Ramago, it's a day that the axe stopped chopping wood. So they would cut it through the summer months, but at the 15th day, the 15th of the month, they would stop cutting the wood. Okay, so this is what the Gemara says. These are the reasons why the 15th day of Av. We still don't have a really understanding why there's a combination of many different events that happen throughout history, and what does it have to do with the 15th day of Av, right? Next thing is, the Gemara continues and speaks about this dance, and it's important to understand this. And the Gemara concludes the Talmud concludes in the Tractate of Tainus, it says, Asa Kadosh Baruch Hu lasis machal l'tzadikim, that in the future the time will come that the Creator God Hashem will make a circle, a machal l'tzadikim, a circle with the sages, with the righteous, and they would dance in a circle, and each one will point, and everyone of the righteous will stand in the circle and point to Hashem, as it were, of course not literally. That everyone will point and say, Zeh Hashem, this is Hashem. So they're going to stand in a circle and everyone will point.
Point to who?
Yeah.
To Hashem. You have to understand what that means, but this is what it says. No, we don't understand what it means. No. Eventually will become a circle, and everyone will stand around the circle, and God will be in the circle, and everyone will point to God and say, "This is God. That we will be rejoicing." Anyway, so there's something about a circle and a dance, which starts off with a dance with the women standing with Machal B'Krabim, they're standing in a dance, and then the Talmud concludes with this ultimate dance where it's a circle dance. Now, not to get ahead of ourselves, but if you look through the story where it originally started, the whole story of destruction, if you say it started with even before the spies, it started with the golden calf, the sin of the golden calf. So what happens with the sin of the golden calf is after Moses comes down from the mountain, after Moshe comes down from the mountain, he hears a voice, he hears that there's sounds going on in the camp, and then he notices that there's dance. There's a machal.
But it's not really dance.
I don't understand what the dance is, but there's something that's, the word the Torah uses is dance. The word is machal. Okay. And he sees the ego, he sees the calf, and he sees, how do they translate it here? They translate it as, and the dances. So it starts off. This is the beginning of the whole event. This is on the 17th day of Tammuz, and that's where Moshe Rabbeinu breaks the tablets, and then goes up and goes back down. And the whole story is related. Starts off, the first destruction is destruction of the tablets, where there's a breaking of the tablets, something that's broken, which starts off with one particular type of dance, and it concludes with a very positive dance, which Asa Kadosh Baruch Hu lasses machal tzadikim. There's a dance of the righteous. What's the difference between this dance and that dance? And there's obviously a transformation that occurs over time, but also inwardly, that it goes from one type of dance. There's two types of dances. There's the unholy dance and there's the holy dance, and they're very different. This is also going to be related, and specifically to the idea of the 15th day of. Okay, so we have now, just to recap very quickly, we have now, the Mishnah says that it was a very auspicious time. Bnei Yerushalayim, the daughters of Jerusalem, would go out and dress in these white garments. The Talmud doesn't understand why, so the Talmud asks the question, why in this particular time over any other time? And it offers 6 different reasons, which seem to be random reasons. One is that they married each other, one that the tribe of Benjamin was able to marry, they buried their dead, that the people stopped dying, that they stopped chopping the wood, that they were able to go to pilgrimage, they were able to enter into Jerusalem. These are 6 reasons which seem to be unrelated to each other. In other words, even though we have 6 reasons, we have to understand what is the deeper reason. In other words, what is the reason behind these reasons? What gave rise to these 6 reasons? These are 6 reasons of events that happened throughout history, and because of that we celebrate. But what happened on a deeper level, on a historical level, on the 15th day of Av, that we can say because of that, this is why the effects of that is that these things happen throughout history. So what is the 15th day of Av? So the first thing that we have to understand is that the 15th day of the month, of any month, then we'll get into this whole thing of understanding of soulmates and neshamas. The 15th day of the month, there are 2 primary Yom Tovim, there's 3 primary Yom Tovim according to the Torah: Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And Pesach and Sukkot both are on the 15th day of the month. Why is it on the 15th day of the month? Because it's simply, the 15th day of the month is, we count according to the lunar calendar, and the 15th day of the month is when the moon is complete. when at least it's observable, so we say the moon is in its complete version. So that's Kaimas Hirba Shlemusa, when the moon is in complete form. That happens on the 15th. What this means on a deeper level is that anything up until the 15th day of the month represents things that are still in a state of concealment. And when it reaches the 15th day of the month, that's when those things that are up until that point in a state of concealment become revealed on the 15th day of the month. So the 15th day of the month is not just a revealing of something new, it's a revealing of the moon just purely on a metaphorical level. If you have the moon that's revealed on the 15th day of the month, it shows us that the moon was actually there on the first day of the month, but we just didn't see it. We saw a little bit, and the second day we saw a little bit more. Till finally the 15th day of the month, we see it completely. So retroactively, it shows that the moon was there present throughout the 15 days of the month. What does this spiritually mean? Spiritually, this means that the 15th day of the month reveals anything that was going on previously on the 15th day, for the 15 prior days. That's what we say on Rosh Hashanah, Tikka b'chodesh shofar b'kesa l'yom chagenu, that it says you should blow the shofar, b'kesa, which is in the hidden, l'yom chagenu, which will become revealed on the 15th. So what you achieve on Rosh Hashanah on a concealed level, which means on an inward level, you achieve on Sukkot on a revealed level, which is through joy. So this is the parallel between something that's concealed and inward, and something that becomes more revealed. Let's see. So Rosh Hashanah, let's say, is a time that you're for yourself, and you're praying for yourself. And Sukkot is a time that you celebrate with others in a Sukkah. So what you're saying is that now you're revealing what was really there, present, also, and on a concealed level. The same thing also we say in terms of Tisha B'Av and the 15th day of Av. That Tisha B'Av is the ultimate time of concealment. The concealment, because that's the time of destruction of the temple. And on the 15th day of Av, it reveals to us what that concealment was all about. What is the concealment of the Tisha of the 9th of Av? So we talked about this a little before, that there are 3 stages in a relationship, which is one is in terms of people that are having a healthy relationship with each other. There's a time that the people are together, right? Then there's a time that people are about to separate. They are separated, and then they return. So let's say there's 2 people that truly love each other or truly want to be with each other. Then there's a time that these 2 people have to separate. Let's say someone has to go away for a few days. So there's the moment before the separation. There's the actual separation time when these 2 people are separated. And then there's the moment after separation when they come back together. Where do we see the unity between these 2 people? The unity between these 2 people is not necessarily observed when these 2 people are going through their daily routine. If these 2 people are in a marriage, in a relationship, and it's day in, day out, they're together, you don't see the intensity of this relationship. When do you see the intensity of the relationship? The intensity of the relationship is seen at the moment before they're about to depart, right? At the moment the person has to say goodbye, that's when you feel the intensity of the relationship. And then the moment the person comes back, when you miss the person, finally return, that's when you see also the unity, the intensity of the relationship. So before and the after. Then there's the middle point where there is actual separation, when the 2 people are separated. So this idea of prior to separation, and the return from separation represents these 3 stages of the 9 days, which is at the moment right before the destruction represents the time right before the separation. That's why we said that the kruvim, the cherubs, and the temple were in a state of embrace, right? They were embracing each other, even though it was a moment of destruction, because these were like 2 lovers that are about to be pulled apart. That's the moment before the separation. Then there's a moment of separation when they're pulled apart, which is Tisha B'Av itself. And then the 15th day of Av represents the embrace that follows the separation. After they're separated on the 9th of Av, which represents that they're 2 separate from each other, the time of destruction, now the 15th day of Av reveals that unity. And we explain that on a deep level, the 15th day of Av, which we say represents the unity, the embrace that follows the separation, not only follows the separation, but reveals that the place of separation was also a deep place of unity, not a place of separation. Because when you have separation creates longing. And longing itself is unity. So even though there's a point of separation, which superficially is when these 2 people are apart, or there's destruction, the fact is that the 15th day of Av reveals, that's what we're saying, that the moon reveals that everything that happened prior was present, it reveals that on the 9th of Av, even though it appeared to be separated, that was also a time of deep unity. That's what the 15th day of the month represents, that it reveals unity. That's the key to the 15th day of the month. It reveals the idea of yichud, of unity. Why is the 15th day of the month specifically connected with the idea of unity? And that's why it becomes a day of mating. Literally, that the women of Jerusalem and the men, they would come together on the 15th day of Av. Why? So this we have to go a little bit deeper. We have 2 days besides the 15th of Nisan and the 15th of Tishrei, which is the 15th day, the beginning of Sukkot, and the beginning of Pesach. We also have 2 other 15 days of the month, which are also minor holidays. Which are they? That's Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of Shvat, and Purim is the 14th day. It's important because Purim is not fully revealed miracle. That's why it's only on the 14th. It's not a full miracle. What we have on the 15th is the 15th day of Shvat, right? Tu B'Shvat, where we eat the fruit, and the 15th day of Av, which is now, tonight. What is the relationship between Shvat and Av? Shvat and Av, in terms of the calendar, is a month and a half before either Nisan or Tishrei. Okay, so there are 2 ways how to count the calendar. The Jewish calendar is counted in 2 ways. There's the way the calendar is counted through the lunar months, which is Rosh Chodesh, that we start a new month of the year. And there's the way that we count the calendar through the solar year. One is Shana, one is called the year, and one is called the months. The year represents the time that's counted according to the solar calendar, and the months are counted according to the lunar calendar. What's the first day of the year? The first day of the year is Rosh Hashanah. What's the first month of the year? Nisan. Right? So they're 2 separate things. The first day of the year in the Jewish calendar is the day of Tishrei. The first day of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, is considered the first day of the year. Shana, that's year. What's the first day, the first month of the year? Nisan. Now they represent 2 different things, because Nisan represents a month of the miraculous. That's when we go out of Egypt. That's the idea of a moon, which is something new, something unusual. That the moon is first in a state that you don't see, then you see in the state that you do see, the waxes and wanes. So that means that it represents the miraculous. And Tishrei represents the natural, the orderly. Right? There's nothing happens miraculous in the month of Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, these are not miraculous times. Even Sukkot, there are different opinions. Some say that the reason we sit in the Sukkot is to remind us of the tents that we sat when we went out of Egypt. Nothing to do with the miracles of the clouds or anything. So Tishrei represents the natural, and Nisan represents the miraculous. So therefore, the beginning of the new year is on Tishrei. The beginning of the new months of the year is on Nisan. There's an argument in the Talmud between Rabbi Elazar and Yeshua, 2 opinions when the world was created. Was the world created in Nisan, or was the world created in Tishrei? Now, we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, and we say Zeh Yom Tchilas Masecha. This is the day that we celebrate the beginning of creation. So we are of the opinion, or we follow the opinion, that creation occurs in the month of Tishrei. The deeper argument between these 2 opinions, whether we say that the creation begins in the month of Nisan or the month of Tishrei, represents inwardly, this means whether we are born into a place of responsibility, that's our most existential self, that's Nisan, that's Tishrei, or is our most existential, essential self the miraculous, which would be Nisan. We rule that it's responsibility, and we aspire for the miraculous. But who we are is, if we want to be a full human being, we have to be responsible for our life. So we're born into Tishrei. That's when we celebrate the beginning of our creation. Yeah. Well, we'll take questions afterwards. Just hold that idea. Yeah. Yeah. We're not going to talk about Pesach. We're talking about Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, not Pesach. The argument is whether the beginning of the new year, where the world was created, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan or Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Nothing to do with Pesach. Correct. So they have the same thing. If you look exactly, the difference, Tu B'Shvat is 45 days, or Tu B'Av is 45 days to Tishrei, to Rosh Hashanah is 45 days. Now, if you look at the story of creation, however that we understand this. So if you look at the story of creation, when is man, when is Adam and Chava, when is man created? On what day of creation? On the 6th day of creation, right? Not on the first day of creation. So Rosh Hashanah, we celebrate our creation. So when is the creation of? When do we commemorate the creation of the world? It will be the 25th day of Elul. If you say that the world was created in Nisan, the 25th day of Adar, right? That would be the difference. If you say, try to understand this a second. If you have beginning of creation of the world is 5 days before the creation of the human being, so it would be the 25th day of either of Adar or the 25th day of Elul. That would be the creation. So how many days do we have prior to the 25th day of Elul, or the 25th day of Adar? Is Tu B'Shvat or Tu B'Av. How many days before that? That's 40 days. Right? 40 days before the beginning of creation. Either the creation of the world in the month of Nisan, or the creation of the world represented in the month of Tishrei. 40 days prior is the 15th day of the month. The 15th day of the month either of Shvat, or the 15th day of the month of Av. Correct? What is 40 days? So the Talmud says that if you look through the Torah itself, you see that 40, what's the number 40 in the Torah? In the Torah, we find the number 40, anytime there's a transformation, the transformation occurs in 40 days. Let's say the Mabul, the desert, in the desert it takes 40 days to go. So the Mabul, the flood takes 40 days, 40 years. In the desert, 40 days. In the Mabul is 40 saw in a mikvah. The idea of 40 represents a time of transformation. So the Gemara says, the Talmud says in Saita, that Abayim Yoim Kaitim Yitziras Avlad, 40 days before the formation of a child, Bas Kol Yotza, there's a voice that goes out, that rings out from heaven. It says, Pliny Lebas Pliny, this so-and-so to the daughter of so-and-so. That even before, 40 days before the formation of a child, every person, there's a voice that comes out from heaven that says that this person is destined to marry this person. What is 40 days before the formation of a child? It doesn't mean 40 days before the conception. It actually means at the moment of conception. 40 days before the formation is, according to Jewish law, for the first 40 days of a child's conception, the embryo for the first 40 days is not considered a formed child. Doesn't have halachically, doesn't have yet a full formation of a child. Once a child is 40 days in the womb, that's already considered a halachic child, a living child. It's part of the mother still, but it's considered a living being. 40 days it takes for it to transform from an egg and a sperm into something that becomes a life on its own. So when it says in the Talmud 40 days before the formation of a child, a voice comes out and says this person is destined to this person, what this means is at the moment of conception. At the moment of conception, there's already, right at the moment of conception, there's already this neshama, this soul, both has a male and a female counterpart. So therefore this neshama, this soul, is destined to marry this soul. Now if we think about this in terms of on a cosmic level, if you say that the creation begins when? The creation begins, according to one opinion, the creation begins on the 25th day of Elul. According to the other opinion, it begins on the 25th day of Adar. Right? That's already the formation of creation. When is the conception of creation? The conception of creation, or the moment, if you wish, the moment of the intimacy between the Creator and the concept of creation is 40 days prior to the 25th day of Elul, or 40 days prior to the 25th day of Adar, which is either Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of Shvat, or the 15th day of Elul, of 40 days before the actual creation of the world, right? Which means that the world becomes formed as an entity for itself, as an independent, as a separate being. 40 days prior to that, there's the conception of an other, which means, on a deep spiritual level, on this day, on the 15th day of Av, and of course we can't really understand this, or we can't really make sense out of this, because before time, we can't speak about time. But in retrospect, this day represents the time, the idea where Hashem as one, the Ein Sof as one, desires to have a relationship with another. And that's the story of creation. The story of creation, of Bria, the world of creation, is that, however we will have to phrase this, is that Hashem is, it's kind of strange to think this way, but Hashem is lonely. I mean, this doesn't mean literally. Is lonely, was one, Hashem Echad. And Hashem desires, freely, not out of necessity or out of need, desires to have a creation that appears to be an other, and that other should appreciate the unity of Hashem. That's the ultimate purpose of creation, in terms of one desiring to be expressed in two as one.
Are you talking about the creation of a human being or the creation of the world?
The world.
The world.
That's creation. Because this is 40 days before the beginning of the creation. The fact that there's manifestation, any type of form, any type of physicality, form, it's both. But any type of manifestation represents an other. It's not a real other. But when you have, what's the difference between prior to creation? I don't want to say between prior to creation, because there is a prior reality of creation simultaneously at this moment. There's a reality where there's nothing, where everything is nothing. But in the world where there is a something, what's the difference between the world where there is a something in contrast to the world where there is a nothing? Is when the world is an ayin, there's only one. And the one is one and a singular. When the world is a yesh, is already in existence, and that yesh relates to the Creator, then there's a relationship. And the purpose is that the two should go back into the one. There's one, singular, but the one singular is lonely because it's only unique, it's only itself. The one desires to be expressed in another, but the other has to be one again. So there's one, two, back into one. That's the purpose of the creation. But the second unity is a unity that's deeper than the first unity. Because the unity of the first level is when there's one and a singular. I'll just give you an example in terms of your own life, and then we'll try to understand how this works in relationships. If you're single, right? That's more simple. What's the difference between a small child? Sorry, no. What's the difference between a small child, a very young child, a child that's growing up, and someone that's mature? In terms of their relationship with themselves. When a child is very young, let's say a 5-year-old boy, 5-year-old girl, there's a very strong sense of unity within themselves. If their life is sort of a happy environment and a good, conducive environment, they don't sense any separation between themselves and self. They don't have. It shouldn't be that way. At a very young age, it shouldn't be this separation. When they get a little bit older, they start feeling conflicting feelings. Let's say they know that intellectually they should be doing one thing. Let's say morally they know they should be doing another thing, but emotionally they feel they should do something else. Right? A young little kid, a 2-year-old child, let's say 2-year-old. A 2-year-old doesn't have the intelligence to say, subdue. Doesn't have the intelligence to say, I think morally I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to be a good person. But I'm going to overcome that, or I'm going to be challenged by that and do this or not do that. I'm going to be nice to you. I'm going to give you my toy, even though I really want the toy, but I'm going to give you the toy. If the child does give the toy, it's usually for its own benefit, because the mother promises that if you give the toy, they're going to get another toy. But they don't have that altruistic understanding. Okay, that's what happens when you're a very young child, which means that it's a very lonely world. I don't want to say lonely, but there's a strong sense of integration, because there's no yet any type of separation. Then the child becomes a little bit more mature, and then they have a lot of different influences. They learn one thing, they understand the other thing, they feel another thing, and then they have to start struggling with all these different things that are going on in their life. Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? I feel my body tells me to do this. My emotion tells me to do that. Intellectually, I understand I have to do that. This is what goes on with people, right? What's a mature person? We say that a person becomes mature, which mature really means echad. We say that a child becomes 13, a boy becomes 13. 13 is the idea of echad, of unity. What does it mean that a person becomes mature? Mature is someone that knows how to bring in all the different struggles and different places within themselves and bring them back to a place of unity. So the unity of a mature person is much different It's very different than the unity that a child experiences. Because a child experiences unity that the child is pre any sense of alienation, of separation. It's a unity that doesn't integrate alienation or separation. It's one. It's simple. Then the child goes through a state that this fragments itself, and they feel different things, and they understand different things, and they feel different other ways. And then they become a little more mature, and they feel centered. So the maturity of an older person is when they're bringing many back into one. That is basically played out on a cosmic level. That's basically played out in creation. Hashem is Hashem Echad, is one, but it's singular in a way that doesn't encompass the other. Then there's the creation of Bereshis Bar Elokim. Hashem creates otherness. And the beginning of that creation begins with the moment when Hashem has a desire, and the Creator has a desire for an other, to have a relationship with an other. Once that there's a desire for the creation of an other, which occurs 40 days before the actual formation of another. But first you have to have the conception, the dream of the other. Once there's the dream of the other, then there's the process of how the other is created. And then there's an other, and then the other comes to have a relationship with the one, and it's from two back into one. And the process of creation itself, and the stages of creation, represents something that's called acher, ba'acher panim l'panim, back to back, to face, that it goes through a process where creation is standing back to back, which is, if you look at the beginning of creation, which we're not going to get into, you look at the beginning of creation, Adam and Eve are created back to back, which means they're continuously attached to each other, but that's not a real relationship. It's like a child having a relationship with a parent. The parent says, do this, and the child does it. That's not a relationship. That's just a one way. It's constant, because whatever the parent tells a 1-year-old child, the child listens, or has to listen, it has no choice. But then the child all of a sudden becomes independent, stands front to front to the parent, instead of back to back, which means that the child can walk away, but it's standing face to face, and that's a real relationship. And if there's unity in that relationship, which is that they both say, okay, I want to be together with you, that's the ultimate idea of love, where you have two that are melding back into one. Not singular one, but two as one. And this is what is going on a deep level. So the 40th day of 40 days before the creation, which is on the 15th day of Av, represents the first glimmer in the mind, so to speak, of the infinite one to desire an other. That's the beginning of the creation. That's why when the Talmud says, what is the 15th day of Av, and gives us all different types of reasons on the 15th day of Av, which seem to be unrelated to each other, the Talmud is giving the external narrative of what's going on inwardly. Because the 15th day of Av represents the moment where the initial spark of unity, where the one desires another, and the other to be one with them. Because of that, as a reflection of that, the 6 narratives, the 6 stories, the 6 events that the Talmud explains occurs on the 15th day of Av reflect this idea of unity. So, for example, obviously the tribes marrying each other is unity. The tribe of Benjamin marrying back into the fold represents unity. Stopping ceasing to lie so they can enter into Israel represents unity. The idea even of burial represents unity. That's if a person passes on, that's the proper place. Is Allah for Atman, Allah for Tasha. You have to return to the earth. The people going back into Jerusalem is unity, and the stopping of the breaking of the axe represents unity. There's no longer death. So these are all I don't want to call them external, but these are all manifestations of something that's going on at a deeper level. The deeper level of the 15th day of Av is that it's 40 days before the beginning of creation. That's like the moment of conception. Just like within conception between two human beings. The moment of conception is the moment when there's unity. That's the ultimate idea of the expression of unity is in the conception, that the two people are together and they create together. That, on a cosmic level, occurs on the 15th day of Av, because that's the moment of the conception of creation, which is the beginning of the other, and that other is created through the 40 days, which we're going to enter into now. The 40 days where that is now created and formed, until finally there's the first manifestation of other, which is the beginning of creation on the 25th day of Elul. Let's try to get through this because we have some other important things.
Technical.
Yeah, what's the technical? Yeah.
You mentioned that human beings were created on the sixth day, and then you did some math with that. But we're not going back to that date. We're going back to the first day.
That's right. So you do.
What was the purpose of talking about the fact that we were created
Rosh-
on the sixth day?
Rosh Hashanah, the way we celebrate Rosh Hashanah is the creation of the human being,
Okay, so
not the creation of the world.
people say it's the creation of the
It's a
world, but
mistake.
it's not.
That's correct.
Okay.
We always say Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of the creation of the world. It's not. It's incorrect. It's the birthday of the human being. I just want to say it's a very important distinction, not only a distinction in technicality, whether it's the beginning of creation, creation of us. The truth is that it's not really relevant in our conversation between us and God and us and ourselves and us and others. The only relevant issue in life is us, is our creation. When are we created? That's important to us. We celebrate our creation because that's important to our spiritual reality. What happens on a level that's outside of us is not really important to us. It's only important to us if it's relevant to us. So we're talking about our creation.
Except here we're talking about the creation of the world.
Because here we're talking about the concept of an other.
Okay.
So 40 days before the concept of an other exists on the 25th day of Av.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is what happens on the 15th day of Av. That's why it's the idea of unity. We're going to talk about this, how this is in terms of relationship, and see how the process of creation, which we'll see soon. There's basically 3 stages of creation, which is first is the conception of creation, then the withdrawal, which is the tzimtzum, and then the words, the creation through speech. And we're going to see how these things mirror our own relationship with others. In order to create a relationship with others, in order to find and to maintain your soulmate, that's really, you have to follow the basic ingredients of creation, because that's the way creation occurs. But this is the idea of unity, that the 15th day of Av represents, on a deep level, represents the understanding of unity. Because of this, if you look through and we started off with this idea of also that we saw that there's a dance, that the story starts off with dancing, which is an unholy dancing versus the holy dancing. If you can contrast this also with the two images that we have, one is the image of the egel, which is the golden calf, and almost a parallel image to that is the kruvim, right? Is the cherubs, which appear to be also like golden calves. They appear to be, God forbid, as idols. What's the difference between the egel, the golden calf, and the kruvim? The basic difference between these two things, one distinction is because one we were created on our own, this is our own projection, and one we were told to create. Okay, that's one understanding. But on a deeper level, there's another understanding, is that one is a singular, the calf is a singular calf, and the kruvim are 2. And it's very important. The singular calf was created by who? By men. What was it? It was a bull, it was a male. It was created by men, and it was served by men, and it's a male image. The kruvim, by contrast, represents the creation of everybody, of all people, men and women, and it was also creation of both a male and a female. So there's 2, and there's a male and a female. We started that when Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from the mountain, and he hears the sounds, and then he sees Mecholos, he sees the dance. The dance that he sees is a masculine dance. I don't mean this as a male or female, but a masculine dance, which is a singular dance. It's a dance that is inward and self-serving. It's a dance where a person dances, this can be physically or inwardly, and it goes further inward and deeper to yourself. That's to have a deeper expression of yourself.
How is that masculine?
And that's because it's not masculine. It's masculine in terms of not. It's not masculine. It's singular.
Masculine is the giver.
Right. It's masculine in terms that it's single. The idea of the feminine, but it's not a feminine dance. It's a feminine in connection with the masculine. In other words, there's a singular dance. Forget about the masculine. There's a singular dance which occurs in the beginning of this narrative, which people are dancing alone. Okay? It happens to be that it was created by males, and it was served by males, and it is a male bull. The end of the story is that this completes the story of the dance. The end of the story is that there's a female dance, right? The women go out in Jerusalem, in Mechailas, and that completes the dance between a male and a female. Not male and female. Forget about the masculine and feminine. What this means is like this. There's a difference between a dance that's singular and a dance that's done with two. If the dance is done with singular, if you're just dancing, I don't mean this literally dancing, but if you're just experiencing whatever you're experiencing solely for yourself, to gratify yourself and to serve yourself, that's unholy. If you're experiencing something for the purpose of experiencing yourself, but also to share it with other, like the kruvim, which represents two, then that becomes a holy act. That it's not, forget about masculine thing, it's not singular versus a relationship.
Saying that at the time of the golden calf, even though there may have been both men and women dancing,
there weren't women dancing.
There were no women dancing.
No, there were no women. It was only men.
Does it say that?
Yeah, sure. The women didn't serve in the golden calf. But that's not even important, because then you're gonna start mixing into the masculine and feminine. We're just saying it like this. There's gonna be a singular dance, which means that a person is just having a spiritual high for themselves, which becomes a source of just your own narcissism and your own spiritual gratification. And then there's something that becomes a holy dance, which a holy dance is yichud. That's the difference. The yichud represents a unity. When we say Asa Kadosh Baruch Hu lasses machal tzadikim, Hashem will do a dance with the righteous. Two things are implied. First of all, there are many in the dance, and everyone's equal in the dance because they're dancing in a circle, and each one's pointing to the other direction. Each one's pointing into the center. So no one's pointing into the self, and no one's saying, I'm dancing and I'm feeling good about myself, but that each one is pointing outward. That's the difference between a holy dance and an unholy dance. A holy dance is a dance that's danced with another, and an unholy dance is a dance that's danced for yourself. And this also could be literal, that when a person is enjoying or is in a state of joy, and that joy is just a selfish joy because they're feeling joys, that becomes a source of the unholy. Or when a person is enjoying, and the expression of their joy is that they want to share their joy with others, and that's a holy thing. And that's even Maimonides actually rules in terms of Yom Tov, in terms of a holiday. How do you know when you're celebrating Samachta B'Chagacha, when you're truly enjoying the holiday? The true definition of enjoying the holiday is not that you just enjoy good food for yourself, but you invite others to partake in the food. When you're having the enjoyment of other people, then you're having something that's not just selfish, but something that's beyond yourself, and that becomes something holy. That's unity. That's the same idea of unity. Let's leave it alone. We'll talk about this soon. That's the same idea of unity, which is that you're dancing with another. You're having unity with another. So, this is what occurs on the 14th, on the day of On the 15th day of Av. So let's look on the Torah, what the Torah says about creation. When the Torah talks about creation, so first we have, before Bereshit Bar Elokim, before the beginning of the creation, before Beis, there's Aleph, which is one, unity. Then in order to create, there has to be a dream, a glimmer to have a relationship, which you say is on the 15th day of Av. Then in that state of the dream, there has to be a second stage, which is that a person has, that Hashem practices, that there's a tzimtzum, there's a contraction of the infinite light for the rising of the vessel. And then afterwards, there occurs the 10 utterances, which is actually the process of creation. If you look in the Torah says the exact same thing. So the first thing is, in order for there to be a dream of another, you first have to sense your loneliness. Right? That's the first thing. You can't dream of another if you don't feel lonely. But before you can sense your loneliness, you have to first be alone, which means you have to be very comfortable in your aloneness. And then once you're comfortable in your aloneness, then you can sense your loneliness. You can't sense that you're lonely if you don't know who you are. So the first thing, let's say we talk about on a cosmic level, you have Hashem Echad, right? And then Hashem, you say that the infinite light, the infinite one, is one, and then desires to create an other. That occurs on the 15th day. But before there was a desire to create the other, one was one. Then the one feels lonely. Then the one creates an other to have a relationship with. The same thing occurs in creation. We have the story of creation. We'll just talk about the second narrative of Adam and Eve's creation, Adam and Chava's creation. Adam and Chava are created twice. First time, they're created in Bereshis, in the first chapter. Adam and Eve are created as one. Male and female, he created them, which means that they're one and the same, male and female. So we're talking about Adam, but we don't mean male and we don't mean female. It's one. Then the second story of creation begins like this. Vayomer Hashem in chapter 2, verse 18. Vayomer Hashem Elokim lo tov v'yos adam levado. It's not good for man to be alone. I'll make for him a helper against him. Vayisa Hashem es Adam min Adama. Hashem creates man. Vayavel Adam, and he created all the land animals, and he brings them upon to Adam. Liris ma'yikoloi, to see what he will call them. Whatever Adam calls the animals, that becomes their name. Vayikra Adam Shemos, and Adam calls the names of the different animals, and then it says, Ula Adam lo matza neded keneged. And for man, he did not find a helper against him. Who did not find? This is a very different. The first statement starts like this. It starts off like this: that Hashem sees that loy toiv, it's not good for man to be alone, right? Therefore, I have to create a helper against him. Then the verse continues, in verse 19 and 20, that Hashem creates all these animals. They're brought in front of Adam. Adam gives them names, and then the verse concludes, for Adam, he didn't find a helper against him. Who's making this statement? The Torah is making the statement, but who's realizing the statement? What's the difference between this statement before, the statement now, and the statement before? It's the exact same statement. But Adam le'matzah is connected. The man did not find someone. The man did not find someone to help him, to be against him. But we just said that 2 seconds ago, that man did not find someone to help him. What this basically means is that at this point, Adam is coming to this realization. First, Hashem says, God says, I created man. It's not good for man to be alone. Who's saying this statement? God's saying this statement. Then Hashem says, you know what? I'll show Adam all different animals, life, let him go enjoy life, let him go see what's out there. And then, who will say the second statement? Adam will come to this realization. Because if Adam doesn't come to this realization that it's not good for him to be alone, he'll always be alone, he'll be fine. Right? That's the first step, just like on the 15th day of Av, on a cosmic level. There was a loy toivo yisa adam levade. There was a saying, there was a statement. Hashem says, I don't want to be alone. I want to create another. I want to have a relationship with a human being. Until that moment, when there was a desire to create another, everything was perfect. The same thing also in our own relationship with others. And if you're alone, and you're happy to be alone, you're never going to find another person because you're happy to be alone. When does the opening of a relationship, when is the possibility of an opening a relationship with another? When you're ready. What does it mean when you're ready? When you say, I don't want to be alone anymore. So before that saying, I don't want to be alone anymore, first you have to be alone. Meaning, what this means deeply means you have to know yourself. You have to know what does it mean to be me. Right? A child doesn't necessarily know what it is to be them. But you grow up and you say, okay, this is where I am. This is the person that I am. This is my personal tikkun. This is the way I want to live. This is the way I want to live for the rest of my life or for the foreseeable future. I know who I am. Now that I know who I am, I'm comfortable knowing who I am. Right? That's the first stage. Like Hashem. Like the Creator. I know who I am. Once I know who I am, the second stage is loy toiv v'yos levade. Okay, now I say it's not good for me to be alone. I don't want to be alone anymore. I want to be with another. That's stage number 1. What's stage number 2? Vayapel Hashem Elokim tadem al Adam vayisham. That Hashem puts Adam into a slumber, and he sleeps. Vayika Hachem Salaisav, and he takes one of his sides, and Vayiska Bas Nachtanani, and Chava is created. What's the stage of sleep? The stage of sleep is 2 things. First of all, the stage of sleep is this place of dream. Right? Second state of sleep is the idea of tzimtzum, is the contraction, is the quietness. It's not good for me to be alone. Okay, I desire to have a relationship with another, but now I have to let the other in. So the first thing that I have to let the other in is I have to create the mental space within my imagination for the other to exist. That's the dream state. Now it doesn't literally mean whoever had a child, God willing, everyone will have children, will know that before even the child is born, you create in your mind a place for the child to exist, the family, the place that the child will be born into. It's not that you actually create that space physically. Some people actually do also physically, but you're creating a mental space that you're opening up a part of yourself to open up yourself to have that child in your life. That's the stage of dream. That you create mentally. He falls into a slumber, he's falling into a dream state. And in that state, he's taking one of his sides. It also means sel. He's taking his shadow, his expression. His expression is the formation of that other. Hashem is creating the other from his own imagination, from Adam's imagination. Just like Nasa Adam B'Kitsalmenu Kidmusenu, just like God creates. Hashem creates in the beginning of the Torah creation, B'Tsalmenu, right? From our image, which also means a tselem, like an image of something. We also create from our Salmoi, from our Tzaloisa, from the same, it's the same root. The root is sel, is shadow. That same image we create. We're like the creator. This is all, the intention of the whole Bereshis is to learn how we should create, not how God creates, because that we don't know anyways. But how could we create this is what the Torah is telling us. How do we create? We have to mimic the process of creation. Just like there's a creation, which is first is alone, and alone practice of tzimtzum. And then in Nasa Adam Mitzalmeinu Kimusenu, we're creating from our image. We create in our image, in our likeliness. We create in our imagination. In that imagination, we create the other, the space for the other. And we also give room for the other, which means we step back. And that's the second very important stage in this process of opening up into a relationship is, okay, I'm alone. It's not good for me to be alone. I want to have a relationship with another, but that's not sufficient enough, because just saying I want another and I'm not good to be alone is a good statement. You're not going to get anywhere. You have to actually create the space within yourself to allow for the other, and almost create that space, and then create tzimtzum, which is, okay, so now I'm going to stop for a moment and allow the other person to enter. Because if I'm just expressing myself constantly, I will never let another person enter into my space. That's the second stage of tzimtzum. The third stage is that Chava is created, and then Vayomer Adam, and Adam says, Zois apam, this time, some my flesh for my flesh, my bone for my bone. Who gives that declaration? Adam gives that declaration. Why does Adam give that declaration? That's the same parallel to the creation of the beginning of the narrative, the beginning of the story of creation in the Torah. Just like in the beginning of the Torah, there's Bereshis Bar Elokim, and then there's Vayomer Hashem, and Hashem says, Yehor, let there be light. Vayomer Hashem, Yehor, God says, let there be this. There's the 10 utterances. It's the declaration that actually creates, and that's what maintains the relationship. In other words, in terms of our own personal life, the speech you have alone, which means to know yourself. Then you have, okay, I know myself. I'm very comfortable with myself, right? Not like a child, but like an older person that's already mature. I'm very comfortable knowing the different things that are going on in my life, and this is who I am. Now I say, I don't want to be alone in this place of aloneness. I want to allow this space for another. I'm opening up something within myself, in the place of my imagination, in the place of my dream. I'm creating that place for another. In the place for another, I'm also practicing tzimtzum, which is when someone does enter into my place, I'm going to be quiet and allow that other person to enter into that place. This both means mentally and also physically, just to allow the presence of another is sometimes just to be quiet and let the other person talk and let the other person be. That's the second stage. The third stage, the maintaining of that relationship is especially related to speech, to the power of speech. And what's the power of speech? The power of speech creates reality for ourselves. And therefore, just like Adam has to declare and say, Zoisapam, this time, the same thing also in terms of maintaining our own relationships, we have to make sure that we use our power of speech correctly. And there's a very sweet teaching that says that speech, we can learn speech from prayer. So if we'll just take prayer as an example of speech, because in prayer we have to speak our prayers. We have to speak tefillah. So if you take prayers, we can say there's different things that we have to do in prayer. And this is also very important in terms of a relationship. So there's one part of prayer is the request, bakashas. Another part of prayer is thanks, giving thanks. And haidah, shvach and haidah, giving thanks and giving praise. Praise and thanks. And these are very important tools in terms of a relationship. That to be thankful for the other, and to be thankful, to verbally speak of your thanks, and also to verbally speak praise of the other. It's interesting that in prayer, in davening, if you look at the davening, in the beginning of the shvach, the beginning of praise, the first prayer of praise in the Shemona Esrei is Magen Avram. And Magen Avram says that you saw Kela Gadol, like Yibav Anara, Kel Elyon, we say Hashem, you're the great, you're the mighty, you're the wondrous, Kodesh Shemaim Aretz, you're the creator, the master of the heavens and the earth. And then in the middle we say V'zoicher Chazdei Avos, Umevi Goyel of Nevaneim, who remembers the kindness of our ancestors and brings redemption to their children. What's the kindness of our ancestors? Imagine we come in front of somebody and we try to sing their praise. We want to tell someone their praise. Just imagine praise between two people. You're telling someone's praise and you're saying, by the way, you're an amazing person, you're very smart, and you're intelligent, you're very kind, etc., etc., etc. You give them a lot of praise, and then you say, by the way, you have beautiful children, and your children love you. So there's two. This is what you say, right? You come in front of God. You say, and remember, you had great we had great ancestors. Remember the kindness of your ancestors. So on one level, it's basically like in a similar way of coming to somebody and saying that you're a wonderful person and you have beautiful children. And it's reflected in your children. That's one thing. But on a deeper level, we're actually saying praise for ourselves. When we say remember the kindness of our ancestors, we're saying that we're a continuation of them. So we're the children. So when we say I remember the kindness of our ancestors, we're saying remember us. We're also good. We're singing Hashem's praise and we're singing our own praise simultaneously. Why? Because sometimes when you praise another, and this can also work with praising God, when you're praising somebody else, sometimes it comes at the expense of your own self. You're such a wonderful person, you're such a great person, you're an amazing husband, you're an amazing wife, you're an amazing person, I love you so much, you're amazing, amazing, amazing. And what that really comes to say is that I'm actually not so amazing, and I'm really not so good, and I'm not so perfect. You have to remember that just like you have to praise the other, just like you have to praise the other, it's a healthy thing to praise yourself. In small dosages. Just like you have to praise the other and say what a wonderful person the other person is, you also have to remember to praise yourself. If you're going to go around and bash yourself and say, you're a wonderful person, but me, I'm lousy and I'm bad and I'm this, after a while, your words create that reality and the person starts believing it. So then you wonder, 5 years later, you're saying, how come you think I'm such a terrible person? Well, you just did it to yourself. In the last 5 years, you've been saying what kind of terrible person you are. This is a very tricky thing with men because when their wives ask them if they look skinny, this is a complicated question to answer. Because either way, you're stuck. But the point is that it's a good thing, instead of getting one spouse into trouble, is really to say, by the way, I look really good today, don't I? And I really think that I did something very kind today, don't you think? Which is to say, not only to speak about the other person's praise, but to also sing your own praise. And that's a healthy thing. So basically, again, try to understand this very quickly to go over what we just talked about, is that the 15th day of Av, there were no greater holidays in the year like Yom Kippur and the 15th day of Av. Yom Kippur, the Talmud says, we understand why, because that's the day of Slichum Kapar, that's the day of forgiveness, which is ultimately the idea of unity. But what is on the 15th day of Av? And then the Talmud gives 6 different reasons for the 15th day of Av. But we try to understand what is the deeper reason behind the Talmud's reason, which means what gives rise to those events, what's the meta history of those historical events. And that is that on the 15th day of Av, that's 40 days before the creation of the world. That's the moment of conception. And just like the moment of conception is the peak of the unity between a man and a wife, and that creates souls and creates bodies, that's the beginning of creation. The same thing also, the peak of unity of creation between the one. And creation is at this moment of the 15th day of Av. And as a reflection of that, that's why that becomes the day that is most appropriate for people to find their spouses and people to find unity on the 15th day of Av, because that is the cosmic understanding of the 15th day of Av, is that it's related to unity. How do we express this, and how do we live this? So we have to look at the Torah. We look at the Torah itself, we see that these ideas are reflected in the Torah. Just like in the Torah, we talk about basic three ideas. Obviously, we can go much deeper, but the three basic ideas that we talked about is that this first is the awareness that loy tov hayos adam levad. It's not good for you to be alone. So prior to that awareness is the awareness of self, that you know yourself, you know what your tikkun is. Then you say, it's not good for me to be alone. Okay, so I'm opening up the space for another. And incidentally, how do you know if you actually meet the right person? If you go through this whole process and you create the space and you create the dream and you create the tzimtzum and you use verbally the power of your verbal communication to create that space in the relationship, how do you know if that person is actually right? The answer is you have to think about your own tikkun. You have to go back to square one. The first point was levada, you were one, right? You were singular. What's the point of your singularity? Is that you have a particular tikkun, a particular task in your life to achieve. If this person is allowing you to achieve your task and allowing you to grow in your particular tikkun, then you know this person is the right person for you. And if this person is spiritually and physically and mentally allowing you to grow in your own personal life, your spiritual personal life, then you know this person is part of your tikkun. Sometimes it's interesting that sometimes it works that certain people come into our lives that not necessarily are soulmates, but they're connected to our soul. We talked about this many times, that there's parts of soul that is distinct, meaning there's a male and a female counterpart, which is the shoresh haneshama, the root of the soul, which means that one person comes from the exact same place. And then there are many souls that we're connected with, because we come from the same area within Adam Kadma, within the primal being of Adam. So these are people that they enter in our lives. They can enter for a shorter period of time, for a longer period of time. We feel strong soul connections with them, and they do serve a certain purpose for certain periods of time. But that time is over sometimes. So you can last with that person a year, 2 years, 3 years. You were with that person. The person definitely served a positive development in your character, and you're allowed to achieve your tikkun. But now you outgrew him, and he outgrew you, and now you have to move to a different place. That's because you come from the same area, but you're not direct neshama. You're not the direct second half. Sometimes also in a relationship, you, in order for tikkun, sometimes even in marriage, it happens more often, because when this is a more solid relationship that lasts over a longer period of time, is actually you marry somebody to help you reach your tikkun, your own tikkun, which is that sometimes if, let's say, a person, this happens a lot, is that a lot of times people marry, let's say a man is marrying a woman, they look, this is not consciously, but they seek to marry, they end up marrying a woman that appears to have the same faults like one of the parents that they think that they were lacking within their parents. What's the point? The point is that if you're in that relationship and your spouse needs from you what they're missing from their parents, you have to know that that's part of your tikkun. Your tikkun is actually to help them reach that place. Let's say, if I'll give you an example. I don't know, this is not a personal example. Let's say you had a mother that whenever you came home, she never listened to you. And then you have a wife or a husband that whenever you come home, they're not really interested in what happened in your life. You have to know, or they're talking on the phone, they're not really interested in what happened. You have to know that your tikkun is actually to rectify that, is to be more attentive to that situation. So the point is that it's about reaching tikkun. That's how we know that it's your soulmate. And then there are different soulmates that are connected with your neshama, and then there's the one perfect soulmate that is your second half. And God willing, we should all, according to the Arizal, according to the Ari, we never really know if we're married to our soulmate 100% until the final moment of the person's breath. After 120, the person's on the deathbed, and you can honestly turn to each other and say that our whole lives we always nurtured each other and we always allowed us to grow and we're both good to each other. Then you can know that your marriage is zivug rishon. The Talmud says that if your first marriage is zivug rishon, is your perfect soulmate, and your second marriage is lefi ma'asav, according to your actions. Which, incidentally, according to the Ari, doesn't mean in sequence. It doesn't mean, let's say, your first marriage, a marriage that you had. Let's say you had a lousy marriage, God forbid. Let's say you had a lousy marriage, and then you married someone else, and it's a wonderful marriage. It doesn't mean that the first marriage was your zivug, was your perfect match, and the second marriage was not. It's possible it's in reverse order. It's just in terms of hierarchy, that your second marriage is your first marriage, and your first marriage is really your second marriage. That could happen. You understand what I'm saying? So it's possible that your second marriage can work out better than your first, and that could be really your perfect zivug, your perfect soulmate. But the Talmud, literally the way the Talmud says it, the zivug rishon, your first match is according to the neshama, which is your soul, that 40 days before your formation, which means the moment of conception. That's when there's the moment of that this soul is destined to have this soul. And then the second marriage is lefi ma'asav, according to your actions. So the Meiri and others write that what this actually means, besides everything that it literally means, it also means that in terms of a relationship, if it's a healthy relationship, more or less a healthy relationship, and this is not necessarily only in a marriage, but it's any type of relationship that you have with somebody, and it's any type of intimate relationship, a relationship that you have over a longer period of time, initially it's because it was meant to be. Your neshama was meant to be with this neshama, that's why you're stuck in this situation, or in this situation, stuck. You're in this situation together. Over a period of time, it becomes lefi ma'asav, according to your actions. Because over a period of time, the relationship is a reflection of who you are. So maybe at the beginning of the relationship, it was because the cosmos aligned that these two souls should meet. But over a long period of time, the relationship that you have with others are really mirror relationships that you're having with yourself. So if you want to know how you're dealing with yourself inwardly, whether you're an angry person, or you overcome anger, whether you're peaceful, you have equanimity, you want to know how you're dealing with in yourself and your own personal development, the best way to look at that is to look at your friends, and they will be mirrors, images of what's going on inwardly, and these are teachers to tell you what's going on within your own self. So over a period of time, it becomes lefi ma'asav, according to your actions.